Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is Dee Dee Russell with WeddingVenueOwners.com, and we are meeting with April Chase, the venue director at the Hangar at Stanley in Aurora, Colorado. And we're going to learn a little bit more about her venue and get some insight on what is it like to be a venue manager, not only in Colorado, but for such a cool, unique, wild wedding venue that has amazing stories, I'm sure. We probably should title these things If These Walls Could Talk. But before we get started, I am going to post this on YouTube. So please like and click the subscriber bell so that you can get notifications when we have another venue owners working interview that we share, venue owner stories. So welcome, April. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I first just want to go ahead and jump right in. I know we don't have a lot of time, and I promised you I wouldn't disrupt your whole day with being nosy and getting to know all about you, but just tell us a little bit about your role at the Hangar at Stanley.
Sure. So I have been here for almost 4 years. Of course, one of those was the pandemic years, so I'm not sure if that counts or not. I'm the venue director here, and so in charge of sales and to some degree marketing. So it's a very exciting role. We have a great space here. It's over 10,000 square feet, 40-foot ceilings, indoor, outdoor, giant airplane hangar with giant rolling doors, and just a really, really fun space. It's really a blank canvas, and you know, people who are looking for an aesthetic that's very industrial or you know, kind of has that's been kind of trendy in previous years. So people have really loved our space for that reason. But because it is a blank canvas, people can come in and do all sorts of variety of things. So you know, from weddings, we've seen all sorts of like wild centerpieces, things that are super bright and green, and that just really kind of pops in our space. But on like the brand and corporate side, you know, we've seen brands come in and do just amazing activations. Because our space is so big, we can actually bring vehicles into our facility. That includes food trucks, but we end up doing a lot of vehicle brand activations as well. So, and the things that those folks have done, you know, with these huge budgets have been amazing. So it's just a really fun space, and we've been able to do, you know, all sorts of different types of events. Weddings, obviously, in this last year have been challenging, but they've been one of the only event types that we've been able to host or that people have been inquiring about. Any sort of life event, from wedding to mitzvah, those things where dates are super important. So it's been interesting times, but we've had wonderful groups. We've had a pleasure of working with some really wonderful families and people who've been super flexible. And of course, because our space is so big, you know, people have been particularly interested in using our space just because we can socially distance and it's very airy. So we have managed to actually stay, you know, pretty busy since things have reopened. You know, we, like everybody, went through that year of nothing, you know, the worst year ever, where there was just, you know, nothing happening. But starting in about March, Colorado started to slowly reopen. And so we've been in that process since then. And, you know, now we're almost back to normal in terms of how we execute events. So yeah, it's exciting to be getting back to that time, like, you know, pre-pandemic times, events as we know them. So
how many weddings do you typically host a year versus corporate events?
We do primarily corporate, and so weddings in a normal year, we might do a half dozen in a season. But because weddings have been in these social or these kind of more, you know, date oriented events where it's, you know, a family type thing, whether it be wedding or mitzvah, we've had a lot of inquiries for those. So our wedding business has seen an uptick for sure. So I'm going to say we're probably going to double that number for 2022.
Oh, that's awesome. How do you feel about increasing that number? Has that always been a yes, we will if they start to come in a little bit more? And what is a typical goal number for you?
Well, I don't know that we necessarily have a goal for weddings. We are, as I've gotten into the wedding business, I'm primarily, my background is primarily corporate. So as I've gotten more into the wedding business and realized like there is so much, it's such a specialized area of event planning. And in particular, if you're getting into any of the cultural weddings, it's even more so that way. And because of the area of town that we're located in, and because of how big we are, and a lot of the cultural weddings are, 500, 600 person
Right.
weddings, we do see a lot of activity for those types of weddings. And so we try to be very careful about planning with those weddings because there is just so much attention to detail that goes into it. So I don't know that we have a goal, but I would say that we wouldn't want to overwhelm ourselves with, I think, more than a dozen weddings a year, particularly because they are so focused on the cultural aspects, and it just requires so much more planning. You almost need a specialized degree in cultural weddings.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, because I think people are fascinated with the larger numbers. And when they start to research larger numbers, when they see that their space could host that, they think, oh, that's a great idea. I'll just go out and target to this audience or to this audience. But there are so many elements and layers to any different culture that might come into your venue. And you could say, well, I'm hands off as a venue owner, so I don't need to know all that. But I think that's foolish, because you absolutely need to know what, even just like with the mitzvahs, you said there are certain elements of that are so important and such a priority. And if you are going to invite those types of huge events in, logistically and safety is one whole element. I mean, just managing that many people and managing them well. But not only that, then having the staff to set up a wedding of 75 doesn't look the same as the staff setting up a wedding or even corporate event for 500. That's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. And there's just so little room for error on a wedding. I mean, with corporate events, there's a little bit more wiggle room to be able to kind of think outside the box or maybe change something. There is not that flexibility with weddings. So, I'm a perfectionist. I'm a type A. So if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. And I certainly, when you are having a memorable day like that, in your lap that you're helping to plan, you just want to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And you're helping to create that experience. It's going to be a memory for the rest of someone's life. So it can get kind of heavy.
So how did the Hangar at Stanley even get started into doing weddings? I'm assuming there was a business there before that the events happened, something to do with airplanes or something like that.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background on the facility. So the Hangar is part of a larger complex at Stanley Marketplace. And Stanley Marketplace is a rehab of an old building that had sat run down and vacant for many, many years in an area of town that was being redeveloped. So through a partnership with the neighborhood and the city, some investors came together to create this boutique marketplace concept. So Stanley Marketplace is home to over 50 Colorado homegrown businesses, all small businesses started here in Colorado. Over 20 food and beverage concepts are here, and then a variety of other retailers, from clothing to salons and things like that. So some really fun stores that are here. We have a place called Zero Market, and that is a completely 100% sustainable, zero waste business. And they basically teach people how to reduce their waste, how to reuse things, and then they sell items and whatnot that are geared towards that lifestyle. So You can make your own soaps there, make your own lotions. So just a really fun, kind of unique and very Colorado kind of vibe. That is just a really Colorado thing to do, to make your own soap and lotion. So this facility actually originally was built in 1954 by Bob Stanley. Bob Stanley is the inventor of one type of ejection seat. So he used to use this building to actually manufacture those ejection seats, and the hangar was where he would store his planes, and he would test out those ejection seats with those planes. So this facility used to be in where originally Denver's airport was located on these grounds, basically, and then it moved out to another location so it could grow. And so this building is one of the only buildings that remains from that whole airport complex. So it's really got some interesting history here, and we're definitely aviation based, and that's a theme throughout the marketplace, from the hangar itself and its name to just various shops and how the decor is here and everything. So it's a really fun place. I think it's kind of it's a not just like a cool redo of an old building, but each business is just so unique and offers something that's very specifically Colorado. So
Absolutely. And then I'm just imagining, as you're talking, I'm imagining all the elements that would go under the umbrella of venue director. I mean, when I think of a venue director, I'm typically thinking of a wedding focused venue director, but you are a venue director for a venue that is open 7 days a week, that is open to lots of vendors that are in there for traditional businesses or for retail of some sort. And so you're managing all of those aspects. Is that correct?
yeah, it really is. It's quite a community here, and no one does anything in a vacuum. It's from managing parking when we have huge 1,000-person events, and navigating both the patrons of the marketplace and the guests of our events. Just to we've had events where we've had 10,000 people come to space, and like if we weren't well coordinated, businesses wouldn't have enough food, or they might not be prepared for that level of traffic on that day. So it's definitely and even next door to the hangar, there's a daycare facility. So I have to coordinate with that daycare facility, particularly when we're having some of these vehicle brand activations, because kids in cars, can get a little tricky. So, as the kids are out playing or going to their playground, we've got to be careful about how we, navigate things and with our logistics and all of that. So it's an exercise in over communication here always. But that's good. We have a very tight-knit community and lots of methods of communication, our Facebook groups and our newsletters, and just being in the facility. It's big. It's over 100,000 square feet, the entire Stanley Marketplace. But when you think about it in terms of like your traditional malls that are really big, I mean, it's very boutique, it's very cute and small. So it's easy just to kind of, run into people and chat about things on a daily basis. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of attention to detail here and a lot of communication.
Well, let's talk a little bit about communication. With that much square footage, this entry, that entry, the main entry, the vendor entry, the load in, all of these different elements you might possibly have for a large wedding. I know you do large events, but we'll just kind of focus a little bit on those really large weddings that you host there. What do you do on day of? Do you guys have walkie-talkies? Do you have, how do you communicate? And how many staff might be? For a wedding of 300, 400, 500, what does that look like communication wise, and making sure, is it daily meetings leading up to it, the week before, the 2 weeks before? How do you and your team make sure you're all on the same page and have all the same information for that really big day?
Yeah, so I have a cohort here, and her name is Phoebe, and she's the beverage director, but handles a lot of the operational on-site, hands-on type of things. So we have weekly meetings, and we cover every event that's coming up that week. And we're usually doing that and targeting those events pretty specifically up to a month prior to them taking place. And of course, with a wedding, I mean, you've had months and months of planning. Typically, in a regular year, you would have that, lead time to be able to plan, so that by the time you get down to, 30 days from the event, it's really just, making sure that the final touches are in place and those things. But leading up, it's definitely a lot of communication. We have copious notes that we take. We have an ongoing document, Google Doc, that essentially just has captured all of our notes from the time that we opened this venue. But it's a reference point for us, that we can always go back and see if we've forgotten something or whatever. But we also use a program called Triple C that helps to keep us, on top of everything and streamlined. Of course, just up to, or my previous position prior to this, so about 4 years ago, I mean, I was still doing things old school style with Microsoft Office through spreadsheets and Word documents. And I mean, it was tedious, and so now we have these things like Triple C, and it's like, oh my gosh, an automated contract of, things that you're tracking everything and all of the reporting that you can do. So yeah, there is a lot of, I guess, organizational aspects from, our meetings to the programs that we use. And then on-site day of, we are usually using our phones. Like the way that our venue is laid out, we almost have line of sight, like to, wherever we're at, wherever another staff member's at. So we're just very much a hands-on team day of, where we're in constant communication. And typically Phoebe is handling the staff and the back end of the logistics and the operations, and I'm handling the front end with the clients and with any vendor communications and things like that. So we definitely tag team, and we found a nice way of separating our tasks so that each one is doing what they're best at.
So on the day of, because you're a marketplace, and I've worked with several marketplaces that do offer weddings. There's quite a few in downtown DC that have a full-blown marketplace with vendors. And then around 6 o'clock, some of those will start to shut down. So wedding setup could start around 3, not earlier than that. But then there's a very short timeline between the time that the vendors leave and the time that you can put your first chair out for a ceremony. And then it's very fast after that. And, so every venue has their own things, but they get it down to a science. So what does it look like for your vendors and your setup time versus, well, for the vendors that are at the hangar versus the vendors that are coming in for the wedding and setup? How do you handle that?
So that's interesting that you brought that up, because we offer a unique program. There are so many industry-specific vendors here, particularly for weddings. So we have a Clementine Salon, which has a bridal suite. We have Poppy and Pine Floral, which does amazing florals. And we have Miette et Chocolat, and that's a dessert company that does amazing cakes and just all sorts of desserts. And then we have so many restaurants here that we have formed kind of our own internal catering collaborative. So a client has a choice of either doing a very Stanley inclusive wedding, which would be leveraging all of the vendors that are already here in the marketplace, or they can work with their outside vendors, someone off of our preferred list, and we can do things that way. The advantage to working with all of the Stanley businesses is not only is it fun branding wise, but all of these vendors are already here on site, and they have access to the hangar whenever they want. So, I mean, in terms of like coordinating setup and load-ins with vendors, it's so easy because they're already here. And it also ends up being a cost saving to a lot of clients, because they don't have to worry about rentals coming in, or, like for a caterer, they might need to bring in ovens or this or that. So there's delivery fees, there's rental fees, there's extra staffing fees for being off site. And of course, all of the businesses, the restaurants here have their own kitchens and their staff on site, and, all of their equipment. So not only is it just kind of cool because it's Stanley, but it also ends up being a cost savings. But I will say that, like, we're very laid back and kind of like backyard barbecue style. So if that's not the type of style that of, food service, or if you need something that's plated, then, going through the Stanley Catering Collaborative, that's probably not going to be your best bet. And you're going to want to have an outside caterer that's going to be able to do something more formal. So, but we have all of this variety of options for clients. And so I think that it's really attractive, from that perspective of, you're not just looking at your standard, here's your list of preferred caterers. You actually are looking at something that's super fun. It's very unique to the venue. So yeah, in terms of, those options, we don't have any limitations in terms of time frames or things like that, because the hangar is like its own separate, it's connected to the marketplace, but it's its own separate facility. So, and we have our own separate load-in area and all of that. So, if a client wants to load in at 4 a.m, that's great. If they want to load out at 3 a.m, then that's great too. So, we're very accommodating that way.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I think people, of course, everybody doesn't realize all the logistics that go into catering. But, no matter how well organized you are, you show up somewhere and forgot all the spoons, or, you show up somewhere and it's an hour-and-a-half drive and there's no sheet pans, or who knows what, all the tongs are missing. As a catering background, those are the things that make you lose sleep at night. Right. But it's kind of fun to think of having that access right there. You forgot the spoons. Well, guess what? Walk over there and get them. They're right here on site, or this food or that food, or if something runs out and they need to replenish. So, that's pretty wonderful, and the planning part of all of this. So what does
it's almost like that's in a way.
I'm sorry.
I was going to mention, because I think that how I try to kind of explain it to people is like, we offer what a hotel does, but we are not a hotel. We are totally outside of that box, but yet we have those same kind of inclusive offerings. Yes, you need an extension cord, you need an extra this or an extra that. We can provide all those things, and it's all in-house. So it makes it, but not at hotel prices.
What would be the smallest number of weddings that you would typically host? What would be on the smaller side?
In terms of guest count?
Guest count.
Mm-hmm. We have had weddings as small as 50. And that was actually taking place during COVID. So, I don't think that there really is a minimum guest count that we'd be looking at.
I think the reason I'm asking that is because you have such a large space. I know that if a wedding, if a couple is trying to plan a very large event, say over 250, I would say the average that I hear about from most of our venues in my research would be 75 to 150. That's pretty typical numbers. But when you start to get to even 175, 200, you start to really minimize the amount of spaces that can host you. And even some that can host you don't want to host you, but they're really not specializing in that much traffic in their parking lot or their meadows or whatever that, whatever they're dealing with for their venue. So with a venue like yours, I think that one of the great appeals in that particular marketplace, and I'm not an expert on it, would be that they could have 400 people, or they could have 260 or 270 if they're just a little bit higher even than the average of 75 to 150. There's this great option. But it also makes me think, if I have 75 or 50 in my wedding, am I intimidated by the amount of space? Do I feel like I can have a wedding that looks warm there and inviting? And to that you say?
Yeah, so we do, we've had, not just for weddings, but also like smaller meetings, like we've had, groups of like 20, and the space can feel swallowing, it can feel pretty big, but we actually have in-house these items. They're like air walls. And so they're pretty cool. They're very industrial looking, but they can be used. They're like 8x4 panels, and so they can be used. We have exactly enough that it goes across the room any direction, because we're basically 100 by 100, so a giant square. And so we have enough panels that we can go diagonal or this way or that way. And we've even had groups come in and like, and this is a really nice look, they'll curve the panels around the space. So in a big square space, that curve adds this softness that's really nice. So we have a way to scale down the space if needed. But yeah, I think the cost of our space is what gets prohibitive for groups of that size. And so they would be looking for something that may be a little bit more intimate and priced more towards that range. But yeah, we do take that into account because it can feel very, very big. So
let's switch a little bit back to the corporate events. I know that a lot of our wedding venue owners, they've got weddings down pat. They've got it. They've got couples calling in, especially this year. They're making up for last year. They're booked and double booked. So I think a lot of them are interested in figuring out how do they reach more corporate clients. And it sounds like you have a lot of corporate clients that you work with. So do you have any tips or any keys or any things that you use specifically to keep those relationships building with the corporate clientele for events?
Oh, I mean, again, I feel like that comes down to communication. I try to build personal relationships with my clients, especially ones that, and we do have a lot of repeat business, whether it's, the area school fundraisers that we do year over year, or area businesses that host their holiday parties with us year after year, company picnics, things like that. And especially this was true during the pandemic, in normal times, there's a reason to reach out to people because there's an ongoing business relationship, right? But then something like the pandemic happens and no one's booking events, and it's like, well, why would I talk to anybody about this? But I mean, that to me, it was the best time to reach out to people and just touch base and say, hey, how are you doing? I know that we normally host this event. What are you guys planning this year? Have you thought about virtual? Or, not to try to drum up business, just to stay in touch and hear how they were moving forward with their programming. And especially for a lot of our nonprofits, that weren't able to generate any revenue last year, wondering how are they, staying afloat and how are they doing? And I think just that organic communication has gone a long way to really solidify those relationships that we had previously. But, I think regular communication, whether it's, knowing someone's birthday and following up, with a hello or a gift or something, if you see something funny or that a person's into something like a particular, maybe it's an industry or a hobby or something like that, and you come across it, sending them a link. I think that the small ways that you can show people that you're thinking about them personally, that is obviously the most genuine and organic communication you can have, and the best way to build those relationships. But again, I mean, just to kind of look at the corporate side of this and just marketing, programs like Triple Seat and programs like HubSpot and, really help us to stay on top of those communications and know when we, haven't talked to somebody for a few months or, and so I think implementing some of those automated tasks as reminders to stay in touch, is important as well.
When will you start to send out something for specific timeframes? For example, I know, again, corporate catering background, that, as soon as March hits, it kind of starts to explode with a lot of events, and that leads into dads and grads, and then you have your corporate either employee appreciation, which they probably didn't get to do last year, their company picnics, things for spouses, all those different things start to pick up. Do you have a timeline that you try to adhere to, even with holidays? Like now is June, I'm definitely all about, don't wait until October, you're gonna, start early. So And I love Triple Seat because Triple Seat does have those reminders. And as you mentioned, HubSpot, I also love that Triple Seat will tell you when someone opened your email. I love that. I love that feature. But what are some of the things you do to reach out and remind them? I know that relationship building piece, which is beautiful, and I wish people would invest more time and energy to really be genuine and to reach out. But if that's not someone's natural and they're starting, what are just some of those timeline pieces that for the events that are coming up or the potential events that are coming up?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, I mean, we do follow a pretty regular pattern throughout the year seasonally in terms of what we're hosting. So we have, you know, our wedding season or festival season 2 is a big thing for us. We have a festival ground here, so we do a lot of food festivals and things like that during the summer. And then of course in the fall, we're doing a lot of corporate, a lot of fundraisers, that type of thing. And then we go into our holiday party season. And then again, when we circle back to early spring, we're coming back into fundraising season again. And then, like you said, proms, graduations, all of that. Typically, I'm following up, I'm trying to do it a year in advance of when I think that they're going to be planning, right? That may be when I'm planting the seed. And that's either going to come usually at the tail end of the sales funnel for a client that I've already worked with, right? So once we get to like that post-mortem place where we're, you know, we finalize the final invoice and, you know, are there any other, you know, loose ends that we need to tie up? And then, you know, typically we'll wrap up that conversation with, are you looking at a date for next year? So, you know, we never want to get to, I mean, it needs to be kind of something that is always cycling, right? So when we get to the end of one, you know, end of that sales funnel, we're kind of starting that again. Now that's for existing business. Now for business that we're just reaching out to, I've been blessed at this venue that because it opened when Stanley Marketplace opened to great fanfare, we do some paid marketing, but a lot of what we do is completely organic. And, you know, we, as a result of the minimal marketing that we do and the marketing that is in collaboration with Stanley Marketplace, people find us. I mean, I am vetting through typically 25 or more qualified leads a day. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. So, and those things come in their own seasons, right? So we see at the end of holiday season, it's engagement season, right? So in the start of January and February, you've got brides that are inquiring about, you know, those dates for the following summer. So I think that pattern kind of naturally exists. And you also find that like some of the planners for some of these businesses, particularly if they have like a lot of people, so it comes down to the same thing with weddings. Like you are limited in venues when you get past a certain guest count, particularly if you're going to do a seated dinner. So, you know, those event planners for those companies, they know that they need to be on it early to find those venues. So it's very interesting to me when like, you know, you have somebody at the end of a holiday season already looking for next year's holiday venue. You know,
you gotta love that.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we need to seat 750, and if I don't start looking now, I am not going to find a space. So, you know, a lot around here right now really is organic. We're still riding that wave of newness and being, you know, the new kid and the cool kid on the block. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, if that is something that we can maintain or how we're going to need to infuse that with other marketing efforts to kind of keep things going. But the interesting thing about the marketplace is that it never stays. I mean, there are businesses that have been here consistently for a long time, but, you know, we do have new businesses coming in all the time. And each time we have like a new restaurant or a new retailer, it adds a new element and like it makes the whole place fresh again, and it brings in new faces, people that have never heard about the Hangar. So, you know, it's a constant evolution here, and I feel like it keeps things really fresh and really fun, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to maintain that because organic unpaid advertising is the best.
You really can't beat it. And I think you guys have a little bit of a cheat with how unique your facility is. And that is always appealing and interesting. It's, you know, to have a big, unique, interesting space is amazing. And then also to have the marketplace. So you again have all of that traffic coming through and all of that word of mouth with people checking in and being there. So, I mean, that is a huge element, you know, towards success when you have that much traffic coming through. A lot of wedding venues have zero traffic during the week, only on that Saturday or Sunday or whenever they host weddings. Right. And a lot of them are so far out without that draw through the week. Some of them do concerts and different things, but you know, you having that traffic there is definitely an amazing plus.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And like, I'm going to just turn this just a little bit so that you can kind of see down. Do you see the red hangar door? Yeah. So, I mean, people just, you know, they just walk by, and I've got my materials out there, my business card, and there's you know, a lovely photo display of, you know, hangar empty, and then, oh, is this storage space, or like, you know, what is this? Because it is an airplane hangar. So, and so if they don't see an event, then they may not know, like, you know, that this is actually an event space. So it is great that we get like so much traffic just kind of walking by in the marketplace. And I've had some of my best events booked as a result of just like being here and meeting somebody when they walked by. So, oh yeah. And that is something that a lot of venues that are standalone wouldn't have, right? Because there's no one just walking by for no reason. So yeah. It is a huge advantage for us here.
Well, April, you have an amazing venue, and now I wish I was there so that we can have our meeting together. I would love to be there, just walking through and just seeing all the spaces. I just can't imagine how cool it looks and the cool, incredible events you could have there, and just the fun. I mean, even with the corporate events, and I love that you start a year out. I love that you get the relationship building. I think people sometimes, you know, I think sometimes they just wait until the last minute and they're like, I have a venue, you do events, let's get together. And it doesn't always work like that. It'd be great if it did, but you know, building relationships is what event management is all about, because they have to trust you with the event and all the details, because somebody's boss is scrutinizing them like craves, and the directors and everybody else is really looking at what you do. And it has to be incredible, especially if you're in meeting and events, it's very high stress. And so also working with that type of clientele who you can manage in those situations. And I do believe that having a relationship versus going in cold at the end with, you know, no build up, no call every couple of months to say hi and hey, is this person still in this position, or just checking to see how you're doing, or even send a little cards every once in a while, or send a little, like you said, if they like chocolates or they like baseball, or, you know, whatever it is. So relationship building is so valuable, but I'm definitely hoping that we can do a wedding venue owners working vacation in Colorado. I'm looking at days and times now so that maybe we can come out there. And if we do, it would be amazing just to get to stop.
That would be cool.
Yeah, that would be so much fun. I mean, Colorado's gorgeous. We have to start going out that way. And so I'm looking at maybe next year or towards the end of next year, but I will keep you posted. And April, if you will just let everybody know the venue name again, and then the website and where they can find you online, because I know they're going to want to check you out, and you'll send me a couple of pictures. Maybe I can add those to the end of the video as well.
Yeah, I would definitely do that. So it's the Hangar at Stanley Marketplace, and there I'm going to give two websites. So stanleyvenues.com is where the Hangar and some of our other outdoor spaces that I had mentioned, you can learn more information about those venues. And then stanleymarketplace.com is where you can learn about the marketplace and all of the wonderful Colorado businesses here. And my name is April Chase, and I'm the venue director here at the facility.
Thank you so much, April. It was so awesome to get to meet you. Almost as awesome as being there in person for a tour, but I appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing what it's like to run this incredibly unusual, unique space and all that you do with it. I mean, we could talk to you for days and days and learn a million things, and that's what I love about the venue owners and managers. I hope your owners know how amazing you are and really appreciate you and all that you do, and I appreciate you sharing with us today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
Have a good day and a great season.
Yes, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.